Okay, so how do you determine the value of a property? It's really not as complicated as some investors out there on the internet, on YouTube or whatever, make it seem. Um, it's really simple. So if you go into a neighborhood and if you go into a neighborhood and houses in this neighborhood are selling for $200,000 each, then okay, so if all of these houses are selling for 200K each, if you find a house in this neighborhood, let's say you find this house, you manage to get in contact with the seller and you talk to the seller, and the seller tells you that he or she wants $100,000 for it. That's a deal, bro. That's a deal. That is a great deal. Um, Sometimes on the internet, when you look at these other investors, other, wholesalers or whatever, um, they try to tell you that you need to, figure out if there's a swimming pool, if your subject property doesn't have a swimming pool and another property that you're comparing it to has a swimming pool, then you have to take off $10,000. And if it has a jacuzzi or if it has shutters or whatever. You know how sometimes you listen to investors and they want you to like detail what every property that you're comparing your subject property to has. It's just maddening. It's just crazy. It's too much. It's too complicated. I mean, if you are an appraiser, then I mean you need to, get that detailed when you're an appraiser. But we're just investors, bro. We have to make decisions pretty quickly. So as long as there's a big delta there, like if houses in the neighborhood are selling for $200,000 in tip top shape, or if they're selling for that in livable condition, as is condition, livable condition, as is condition. If houses are selling for around that price, 200K in livable condition, like as they are, and maybe there's a house or two in this neighborhood that is selling for 250K, 270K, if they're all fixed up with brand new materials inside. If you find a house for $100,000 in this neighborhood, or even 150, that leaves you with a $100,000 delta there to do renovations if they need them. These houses here, $200,000 in this neighborhood, in my area, because every area is different, right? Across the nation. In my area, a $200,000 market, it's a pretty good market. That means that these houses are between year built 1970, 1980s, 1990s, somewhere along in there. So the technology in the house, the way the houses were built at their conception, the year of their conception, 1980, 1970, 1990, these houses at that time were being built with better technology compared to houses that were built in the 1940s and 50s. So these houses, they just need, they may not need the works. They may need just minor updates. But you have a $100,000 delta there that you can work with. So when you have a big spread like that, when you're wholesaling and when you're bird dogging, you want to make sure that you have a big spread between what the seller wants and what you can sell the house for. You want to have a big spread that takes all the chaos out of trying to figure out the value of the property. If there's a big spread there, then it's obvious that it is a deal. Um, People try to make value in properties so complicated, but it is really this easy. Like, for instance, I want to show you an example. So one time I got a house under contract. I wholesaled the house. And in this neighborhood, houses were selling for $150,000. So so this is the neighborhood, and these houses are selling for $150,000. And that's just in as is condition, 150K. Now, so as is. Now, after a renovation, let's just say ARV, they were selling for like 200,000. Yeah, they were selling for like $200,000. Now, I did my methods that I use that I teach about, and you can learn about these methods um, on how to find houses like I find houses in the description. But I used my methods, and I found a house in this neighborhood, and I talked to the seller, and you know what? I was negotiating with this seller for like 2 years, actually. She received a letter from me, and she called me, and she just wanted to get to know me. She wanted to know who I am and whether or not I was a real person. She really wanted to know if I was a local person. So keep that in mind for all you virtual wholesalers out there. She wanted to know if I was a local person, because she was getting calls after calls after calls of people who were in California and Arizona and Washington D.C. These virtual wholesalers. She was getting all these calls from people who are out of town, and she was like, I want to sell my house to someone locally." So we talked for like 2 years. Like I said, at that initial conversation that we had, in that initial conversation we had, she just wanted to know who I was. And I talked to her, and I asked her if she had a price, and she didn't have a price at the time. And I said, okay, well, if you do figure out a price, because I rarely talk to sellers after they say they don't have a price. Like I rarely like keep the conversation going at that moment when they tell me they don't have a price, because they're just shopping around when they say they don't have a price. They're trying to get people to give them a price to see where the market is. They want to see how much people are willing to spend on their property. So they're just testing the market out. I don't want that. I want people who are ready to sell. So she told me she didn't know what she wanted to sell the house for. So we had light conversation after that, and then we hung up. And then I called her back maybe a year later and asked her as I called her a year later and asked her if anything has changed on the price of the house. And she said, "Oh, I don't know. I got this one person who's trying to buy right now." So I was like, okay. And that person tried to buy the house. But what that person ended up doing was getting in the house and trying to fix the house up before they bought it. So this buyer had her house under contract and was trying to fix it up before he actually bought the house. And then, while he was doing that, he decided that he did not want to buy the house, and he left the house in as is condition from him trying to renovate it. So he left everything as it was, and they had to go to court and everything. So she took this guy to court because she was like, "You got to put the house back in this configuration that you found it in, that I gave it to you in." I was under the impression, this is the seller saying this, she was under the impression that he was going to buy the house. But what he did was he asked her, he was like, I'm going to buy it. I'm going to buy it for sure. But I want to start the renovation now. Can you, will you give me a chance to renovate it now while we're in contract? And, I promise I'll buy it. So he made all these promises, and she went on ahead and let him start the renovation of the house before he actually bought it. And she let him do it, and he started on it, didn't finish it, didn't buy the house, didn't put the house back in its condition that she gave it to him in. She didn't actually give it to him, but he didn't put it back in the condition that he found it in. And they had to go to court, and she got the property back, and she called me, and she was like, "Hey, I just went through this whole situation with this guy. I hope you don't do me like this." And I hate it when buyers do that shit. I hate it when buyers do that stuff. If you're a seller out there, you should never let a buyer start a renovation on your house before they buy it. Don't do that. Don't do that, because they have to buy it. Make sure they go through with the purchase first, and then they can do whatever they want to it, because it's theirs now. But she said, "Man, I hope you don't do me like this," because so now her trust is gone. She like, "Man, I don't want to deal with these people. I would rather just go through a real estate agency now. And because a real estate agency is going to filter through the buyers. They're going to figure out who is a qualified buyer and who is a real buyer. They're going to do that whole process." And she was kind of feeling like she wanted to call a real estate agency at this point, but she didn't want to call a real estate agency. Sometimes sellers don't want real estate agents to get into the deal, because when a real estate agent comes to your house and looks at it, they're thinking about how it can be best presented to the market so it can sell quickly. So they're going to tell you, "Hey, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do that. You need to fix up this, you need to, pay to get this done." And sellers don't want to do all that. They want most of these sellers really, they want to sell the house in as is condition, and they don't want to do anything. They're willing to go down on price if the buyers say, "Hey, can you do this? We need this done before we can buy it." As long as the sellers can get some profit out of this house, they're willing to come down on the price and let you do all the work. They don't want to do the work, but some sellers do. But like I said, she was, her trust was broken at this point, dealing with investors. But I reassured her that I will not do that to her. So we talked, and I got the house under contract for $60,000. So what do you think I'm thinking at this point? Houses in this neighborhood are selling for 150K in as is condition. And as far as the condition of her house, it was in, if I had to grade it on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say her house was probably a 5 or 4.5. She had a washroom that did not have any sheetrock in it, because the guy took the sheetrock down. So you can see, the bays and the 2x4s, 2x6s, which are usually hidden behind the sheetrock. So you can see in there in the cavities, you know what I'm saying, and all that. And so that looked ugly, but it wasn't in bad shape. And then she had a bathroom, a second bathroom that the guy had installed in her house. And he installed it, and he didn't finish it. So he installed it, and it was installed pretty well, pretty good. But he didn't put the finishes in. He didn't put flooring in. He didn't put, sheetrock in, or none of that. He didn't put the shower in, but he had the shower there. The shower was in the living room, and so he didn't install it yet, but the bathroom was okay. So it was that, and then just the ordinary cosmetic things, paint and new flooring would need to be put in. The kitchen was in okay shape, because the guy actually redid the kitchen, and the kitchen was in okay shape. And so I couldn't believe that I was getting the house for 60K, because the previous buyer who didn't buy the house but did some of the work, he did an okay job. The behind the house was not in good shape. It was, some of the siding was missing, and you can see the sheathing of the house. So it wasn't in great shape. The AC unit outside wasn't in the best of shape neither. It would need to be replaced or maybe repaired. But so the condition wasn't ideal, but $60,000. That gave me a, what is that? That's a $90,000. 19, 11, 12, 13. That was like a $90,000 delta. If I was to sell it in as is condition, it was a $90,000 delta. And like I said, the house was like a 4.5 or a 5 out of 10. So to get it in livable condition, it wouldn't have taken that much money. Maybe about 50K or something like that, or maybe not even that. The guy I sold the house to, the guy I wholesaled the house to, he put so this cash buyer that I wholesaled the house to, he saw the opportunity like I saw it. He put 20K into the house. He put 20K in the house. So he was in at $80,000. And he got it to livable condition because he has some handymen that work for him that, he really abuses, really not like physically or emotionally, but as far as like financially, he gives them not enough money to really make it in life, but they do all the work for him, So I guess these people are in his family or whatever, and he just, gives them pennies, and they create magic for him. So he gave these people, he spent $20,000 on repairs and labor, and the house, I saw the house, and the house was in livable condition. It wasn't in the best condition, but it was in livable condition. He fixed all the siding, he fixed the AC unit, he just had it repaired. He and him and his family installed that shower into the bathroom, and they put the finishes in themselves. So they spent about 80K on the house. So he's all in for 80K, and then closing costs and everything. So he probably was in for, I think closing costs on his house was like $500. It was like $1,000 or something like that. So he's damn near in for 80K. So he's in for 80K. So he has about minus 80. He has, what is that? Oh, geez, I can solve this. Wow. So 15, so 7, I think that's right. So 70K. So he has 70K of equity in the house as soon as they fix it up and everything. He has 70K in equity. And then not only that, the house, after it's really fixed up, like all new finishes and everything, could sell for 200K. So, actually the guy has, what is that? That's 120. He has 120K in this house. You know what I mean? So my point is, so I got the house, like I was saying, I got the house on the contract for 60, and I assigned the house to him for 65, for 5K. So he bought the house for 65K, gave me 5K. So I made 5K on this deal. Okay. It's crazy. It's crazy when you get to looking at all these numbers, because it's like you as a wholesaler or a bird dogger, you're getting pennies. You're getting pennies actually. So I got 5K. This is for me. I got 5K out of this deal. This guy got 120K. Plus he has a house that I think he's renting for like $1,500 a month. He's all in at 80K, and he's renting it for $1,500 a month. He has no loan or anything. He bought this cash because he has like, 40 or 50 other properties that he's generating rent from. So he's generating income from like 40 or 50 other properties that he owns in this city. So he got an excellent deal. And for me, I got 5K, which is nothing, but you know what else I got that is pretty priceless? Education. I'm looking at this whole thing, him and, the cash buyer and what he has and how he built his empire. Because during this deal I got a chance to talk to him and find out more, because this was the first time I met him with this deal. And now we've been working together for years and years. But even though I got 5K, which is nothing compared to what the end buyer got, even though I got 5K, it's kind of like you're in college, man. It's kind of like you're an intern. You're making a little bit of money, but you're learning as you gain more experience. So don't think about the money. I made a video about this before. Don't think about the money. It's the experience that you want to gain. You want to gain the experience. You know what I mean? You want to learn from these people and understand what a great deal looks like. Because now I know. Now I understand that if I find a house in a neighborhood like this where houses are selling for this much, 150 and as is condition, if I find a house for 60K, I'm going to buy it myself now. Now I have enough money to, buy this type of property at this price range for myself. And I understand that you can put, this amount of money, this 20K, you can put this 20K in here and get it to livable condition. Because before, when I was a beginner investor, I used to think that houses needed to be in like pristine condition. Like I used to think that the repair costs would have to be pretty high to get a house in pristine condition. And they do. If you're trying to get a house in almost brand new condition, it's going to take a pretty penny to get it to that state. But this guy right here kind of taught me that with rentals, you don't need to get them in pristine condition. You need to get them in livable condition, and you need to be respectful of your tenants. So you want to make sure that you have good materials in there. But you don't have to spend like 50, 70K on this house. He didn't have to spend that much money like I was thinking. I was thinking that you would have to spend like, 50K to get it in great condition, or even more than that. Because I think the house was about 1,500 square feet as well. But he taught me, he was like, no, you don't have to get the houses. You don't have to spend that much money on a house to get it in pristine condition for a renter. Now, if you were selling it, yeah, if you want to make it more marketable, you need to probably put a lot of money into the bathroom and the kitchen, and then just put a new floor in and fix whatever else needs to be fixed. And, you also have to look at the power, electrical, plumbing, and everything. Make sure all those things are in great condition. But if you're just using this property as a rental, it doesn't have to be in like crazy good condition. You don't have to put, if the flooring is bad, you have to put new flooring in. But if the floor is not bad, you don't have to put new flooring in. Just keep it the way it is. Just fix up or touch up the things that the house already has if you're going to rent it. But if you're going to sell it, then yeah, you want to make everything look brand new, whether that's cleaning or buying new materials. You want to make everything look brand new so it can be more marketable. It can be more sellable. Because you want these properties, especially right now, you want your houses that you fix up to sell fast, as quickly as possible. Because you don't want to sit on a property for too long, because you have to pay for holding costs, and those really eat up your profits. I found this out from another cash buyer. Like, he uses loans to buy the house, and he uses a loan to do the renovation. So he's sitting on loans for, the duration of trying to sell this house. And he's making these payments to pay off these loans. And that can really eat up your profit, especially if you don't make as much profit as you thought you were going to make. But as a wholesaler and a bird dogger, it's really good. Don't get discouraged by this 5K that I made here. I probably could have made more, but next time, because of this experience, I can make more. I can ask for more money, because at the time I really didn't understand that this guy would end up getting 120K in equity. You know what I mean? I didn't really understand how he was going to do that. But now this experience taught me, okay, now I'm looking at everything from the end to the beginning instead of from the beginning to the end. Because at the beginning, when you're a beginner investor, you're at the beginning, and everything just plays out for you, and you don't really see the end. Really, you don't really know what the end looks like. But when you have experience like this, you look from the end, the perspective of you like of a new family moving into their property and what their property looks like. You look at it from that perspective to you finding the property and negotiating with the seller for the very first time. I can look at deals now from the end to the beginning rather than from the beginning to the end now. And that will make you ask for more money when you're a wholesaler or a bird dogger. So, if I was to run into a situation like this again, find a house like this for this price, 60K, in a neighborhood where houses are selling for 150K, I know now to ask for 10K now. I want 10K for an assignment. 10K is good. 10K is good for a quick flip, because you have to make sure that the seller, the buyer, the cash buyer, is happy to work with you. You know, some cash buyers get disrespected if if they run into a bird dogger or a wholesaler who wants to get, like, what if I would have asked for 50K from this deal as an assignment? What if I find a buyer, a cash buyer, and I tell them, I'm like, hey man, I found this house. I know you can get probably about $100,000 out of it, and that's just in equity, not even counting rent. I know you can get that. I want 50K out of this. Some cash buyers will give you the 50K, but most of them will be like, what, 50K? I don't even know if I can get 50K out of this property, because there's a lot of unknowns. Not a lot of people have the resources that other cash buyers have. Like in this case, this guy had his family members that he was like underpaying, and he gave them 20K, and you know afterward he got a $150,000 house that he paid $65,000 for. Well, after the 20K, he paid, actually he paid 85. I said 80K. So he paid 85K. So he paid 85K, and now he has a 150,000 or a 200, probably, right now, because that was a couple years ago. And if he's done some updates since then, he probably has a $200,000 house now. But not everyone has the same talents and resources. So if for this guy, he had a resource that not every other cash buyer has. Now, if you get a new investor, real estate investor, or a new flipper, these people who are new flippers, they're not really experienced. They probably did one or two or three flips in their lifetime, but these people, they don't have as much experience as this cash buyer that I work with has. In that case, they don't know what they're going to make. You may say, "Oh yeah, you can get like $100,000 out of this house," but they can't really see it. Some investors like to be pampered and like to have their hand held in a deal. I remember one time I had a cash buyer. He wanted me to like detail every bit of costs, everything. He wanted me to detail like how much it will cost to get new cabinets, how much it will cost to put new walls in a house. And then he wanted me to also calculate the closing cost and the acquisition. He wanted it laid out all pretty in a nice spreadsheet or whatever. I never talked to that cash buyer again because he wanted me to hold his hand. He was just the money. He just had money set aside that he wanted to invest. He didn't want to do the work. He wanted someone like me to do all the work for him and just take his money. He's the type of person that would give his money to an investor like a Warren Buffett and say, hey, just here's the money, just put it into real estate, and just let me know when, I'm making money. Just let me know what am I getting out of this deal. Just here's the money. I don't want to deal with all that stuff. I got a day job that I like, that I love, and I want to only pay attention to that. Here's the money. He's one of those type of people. He probably would make more money just lending out money than trying to get someone to lay out every little detail of a deal for him, because I doubt that a lot of people would want to do that. I definitely didn't want to do that. I was so used to working with investors who were real estate investors who didn't need anyone to lay out everything for them in detail. I was used to people like that. I would just send them the address and be like, hey, I just found this property and I got it for this price. Well, this seller wants it for this price. What do you think? And they're like, oh man, this is a great deal. And they will just hop right on it. They don't need a detail, they don't need everything like that. So I never talked to that guy again, but you'll run into people like that who want to be pampered. And some of these new flippers, these people who just found out, it's people that get a high paying job and then they're like, you know what? I want to be a real estate investor. I want to be a flipper. I like, watching, HGTV or whatever, the home channel. They see them people on there flipping and like, hey, I want to do that. We want to do that. Sometimes those investors need to be pampered. They don't really know a lot about how to flip a house. So they want you to give them all the details. And see people like that, those types of cash buyers, you can't come to them and say, I want 50K for this. They'll look at you like you crazy, because they don't even know if they can make 50K from this deal. So you either have to go to another cash buyer, a more experienced buyer, or you have to ask for a reasonable assignment contract, because the goal at the bird dogging and wholesaling stage is to get this assignment fee as quickly as possible. You don't want to, drag this along. You want to get paid quickly. If I can get paid 10K today instead of waiting, compared to getting paid 50K in the next 30 days, I mean, it depends on what type of person you are. But if someone can give me 10K today, and I have it for sure, because time does damage a deal. As time goes on, things change. You don't want to let time go when you're dealing with these deals. When you're trying to make money in real estate like this, you do not want to let time just go on, because things change, bro. Emergencies happen. Anything can happen, as you let time go on. So when you get to my level, you understand that if you had the choice between making 50K in the next 30 to 45 days and making 10K today, when you get to my level, you understand that making 10K today is the best deal. That's the best deal. Waiting for that 50K from a buyer who is less experienced and and don't really know what they're doing, or they're kind of like on the fence on what to do to a property like this that they're trying to fix up and give you the 50K. They're if they're on the fence about what the house needs and all that, you kind of get these signs from cash buyers. You really have to vet them a little bit and find out their experience level. Cause see me, I don't usually deal with cash buyers who do not have rental properties and who have not flipped at least, I don't know, I always say this. If I ask a cash buyer how many deals they flip every year, if they don't tell me that they have flipped at least 2 deals every year for the last 5 years or so, I look at them like they're beginners, complete beginners, and I'm kind of skeptical to give them a deal like this, for instance, because they don't really know what they're doing. The probability of them walking away from a deal is higher than a more experienced investor. So, I don't really deal with them, but you have to As for when you at this stage wholesaling and bird dogging, you have to know where we are. We're the middle men and women. We're in the middle. People on both ends, the seller and the buyer, the end buyer, the cash buyer, they don't really expect you to make more money than them. You know what I'm saying? Because you want everybody to be satisfied at the end of when we get to closing. Everyone should be happy with what they're getting. People do not, you do not want to get to closing and people are like, why is this guy getting 50K to be the middleman and I'm only getting 30K as the seller? It doesn't make any sense. Red flags are going to go up, and you're not going to get a good reputation that way. You're not going to, if this seller needed to sell another house, you're not going to get a call from them. So you have to ask for a reasonable, your assignment contract should be reasonable, okay? Not 50K, 100K. Some wholesalers try to get 100K. I mean, if it's a commercial property where you have it on the contract for $600,000, and it's worth like $1.2 million or something like that, and you wholesale it to a end buyer, yeah, you can get $100,000. That's reasonable. That's a reasonable assignment fee when you're talking those type of numbers. But with houses like this, you buying it for 65K, and a 10K assignment fee is reasonable. You want to be reasonable, bro. The seller is getting 60 something thousand, and minus any loans or liens or anything like that they have, and the cash buyer is getting 100 something $1,000, or $50,000 in equity, and then plus they're getting the rent from the property henceforth, going forward. So you have to be reasonable. Some of these wholesalers, man, they try to ask for crazy amounts. I've ran into new wholesalers in my local area that will have a house on the contract and they're trying to get $30,000 to $40,000 from it. It has to be relative to the deal, of course, but some of these wholesalers would have a house on the contract for like, 50K, and they want 50K, as an assignment fee. And maybe the house will sell for like, 200,000 or something like that. But, it all depends, it all depends. And sometimes you'll find cash buyers who will give a person that. But most of the time, and based on my experience, I've been doing this for 9 years now. And I've probably spoken to hundreds of sellers and been involved in a lot of deals. A lot of deals didn't go through. There's hundreds of deals I've seen and analyzed, but I've only wholesaled or bird dog about 30 something deals. I've only made money on like 30 deals in my 9 years, because I've been doing this part time for the most part. But these crazy assignment fees, avoid them. They have to be reasonable. But this video is about trying to figure out the value of a property. And it's really easy. It's really easy. Don't look at it like it's complicated. Just go to Zillow, and if like in this case right here on this deal, I went to Zillow and I saw that the houses were selling for 150. Zillow had it at 150. That was the value of it. And maybe it was a little bit lower because sometimes Zillow will be off. Zillow will be off. You'll learn it as you gain more experience. Zillow is not like the holy grail of house value estimates. It's not the holy grail. It'll be off. I think maybe this house on Zillow was like 100,000. But if you actually look on Zillow at the neighborhood section, where you can zoom into the neighborhood and you can see what other houses are selling for, because these houses were on the MLS or listed by a realtor. Most of the time, the houses that you see that have sold around this property that you're looking at. So if you look at Zillow's neighborhood tool, where you can zoom into the neighborhood and look and see what other houses have sold for, that's what you really want to do. You really want to do that. You really just don't want to go by this estimate. You want to go and look and see what the houses have sold for and compare only those houses. Because sometimes Zillow's estimate is comparing houses that don't have the same bedroom and bed count as your subject house, and the square footage is pretty okay, but you have to really use that neighborhood tool to do it, and also you can use ChatGPT as well. But you have to zoom in and look and see what other houses were selling for. And when I looked at this neighborhood here, when I zoomed into that neighborhood tool on Zillow, I saw that houses around the same square footage as this house, same look, everything, they were selling for 150 in as is condition. Now, I saw a couple houses in this neighborhood, like one or two, that were selling for $200,000, and they had everything. They were the signature flipper type of style of a house. Light, bright, white cabinets, new appliances, stainless steel appliances, the new flooring, laminate flooring all throughout, white. The walls were painted. That's like the signature flipper house, where everything is pretty much brand new inside. All the finishes are brand new. Power, saying 200 amps of power. I hope I'm saying that right. Power and the electrical system is something that I need more work on. I usually have to ask a contractor about the power situation, or an electrician. But those types of houses in this neighborhood were selling houses in that condition, really, really new condition looking. They were selling for 200,000. I saw one or two properties selling for that. So I was like, wow, the value was like right there in my face. It was like, what, this is a great deal. Like, you'll see these type of properties. They're kind of, they're not, you won't see them that often. Sometimes you'll see, in some cases, when you're trying to get a value on a house, it will be pretty close. Like, the value and the price that the sellers want will be really close. Like, let's say that a seller wants, I'm trying to get a new sheet here, but it's kind of hard. Okay. Yeah, let's say that a seller wants, let's say that you find a house in a neighborhood where the seller wants $100,000 for the house, and houses in this neighborhood are selling for $150,000, all fixed up. So ARV 150. Now that's a $50,000 spread. It's not much to work with. In this type of situation, it's like, it's a deal, and you have to like use your cash buyer pool. You have to go through your cash buyers and see if anyone is interested in this deal. This will probably be a deal for a landlord type of cash buyer or investor. So this would be a deal for a landlord, or you may be able to buy it, because all you would need is 20%, which is 2 times 10, which is $20,000. You would just need $20,000 to buy $80,000 loan. But these days, that could still eat your rent, because a property like this will probably rent for $1,000 to $1,500. Oh, let me erase that. Yeah, a house like this would probably rent for $1K to $1,500. Man, not these days, right? These days, you probably, a house for this much in my area, depending on where you at. These days, these types of properties probably won't rent for that much, maybe $800 to $1,000 in rent per month. So that 1% rule is just out the door, right? But it's kind of right here, 1% rule. But this would be a deal for a landlord. Like, as far as like flipping this, the ARV is 150. So if the house is 100K, is if the seller wants 100K and they're not going no further under, they don't want anything under 100K. It's like you're like, okay, it's there's a $50,000 spread there. But what if you're trying to flip it? Can you flip this house? Can you make this house more marketable within this spread right here? Can you put 20K in it and make it worth 150? It all depends. But my point is the spread is too thin. It's too thin. I mean, it's 50% of what they want, but it's still too thin. It's too thin. Closing costs, uh, commissions to real estate agents. If you're going to use real estate agents, there's no telling what the house needs to get it to marketable condition. In this situation, the seller obviously wants too much because you want to find really, really great deals. You want this house really to be at 50K. You know what I'm saying? So you can have a $100,000 spread. That way, you can wholesale this house with no problem because there's a $100,000 spread. As long as it's not, as long as it's still in livable condition, and you got a $100,000 spread. This is kind of like a pipe dream, right? But this is what you're going for. But you only can get what you can, what's available to you. You can only get what you have to take chances sometimes. But for properties like this that don't have a big spread, I like to bird dog these houses. I don't like to wholesale them because I like to wholesale properties that have at least a $100,000 or maybe a $70,000 spread. I like to wholesale those houses because you can get those houses on a contract and have confidence that you'll be able to assign this property to a cash buyer who will be able to make money on it. And they won't try to send you back to the negotiating table with the seller and try to work out a new price because, like I said in previous videos, you don't want to work in that gray area. You don't want to be working for the cash buyer. That's kind of a gray area. You don't want to do that. You may get in trouble with the real estate commission if someone files a complaint against you. So you don't want to be working for the cash buyer. You want to be working for yourself. And if the cash buyer doesn't want to buy it and they want you to go back to the negotiating table, then move on to another cash buyer, or either go back to the seller and say that I don't want to buy this deal, because you're not obligated to buy it. The contract thing, contracts are only legally binding if the person takes you to court about what you said in the contract. Like, it's rare. Like, if you say in a contract, if you put a house under contract and you say in the contract that I am going to close at this date at this place, a seller may see that and be like, okay, well, he's legally obligated to buy it now. And if he doesn't, I can take him to court, because of what he said. But what most people realize, they don't realize actually, is people rarely want to take you to court because these people in these situations, most of these sellers are in like situations where they're like strapped for cash. That's why they're selling their house at such a cheap price. Some sellers are okay financial condition. They just want to sell their property and move on to another property. But people rarely have enough money to take you to court because you said you was going to buy their house. They're just going to, rip your contract up. If you don't want to buy it, they're just going to rip it up and just look for another buyer. They're not going to take you. It's rare that people take you to court to make you buy their property. So, sometimes on the internet, you can see other people, new investors, new beginner wholesalers, they're talking about having this language in your contract to where you can get out of a deal. I mean, it's good to have that. You want to cover your butt just in case you do run into a seller that will take you to court, because you might run into someone who wants to spend lower lawyer fees and court fees and whatever else that you need to spend to take someone to court and sue them for what is it called? Not going through with the deal. But that rarely happens. That rarely happens. I mean, if you tell a seller, I've told sellers plenty of times, I would get a house on the contract and I would, see if I could find a cash buyer who wants to buy it from me, to take my place in my contract. And Sometimes I won't find anyone who wants to buy the property, and then I'll go back to the seller and tell the seller, you know what, I want to pass. I looked at the property. I may give them some kind of excuse and say that the property was going to cost me more than I thought it was to renovate and fix up. So I want to pass on it. I'll just pass. And most of the time, I've never had anyone say, "No, you're going to buy it. I'm going to take you to court if you don't buy it." I never had anyone tell me that. Every time I say that to a seller, they're like, "Okay, all right, thank you." Or maybe they won't say thank you. Maybe they're pissed off because I said I was going to buy it and then I said I wasn't going to buy it now. But every time it's like, okay, I'm moving on to the next buyer. So but like I said, with these type of properties, with these, when the spread is not, you want to look for spreads of $100,000 at least, $70,000 at least for my neighborhood, for my area, because in my area, you can buy a house for 1,500 square feet for 300K, 250. I live in a pretty big metro area. So in each of the different suburbs of cities, they have houses selling for 300, some 250, some 200,000. I mean, my neighborhood, my area is cheap compared to like New York or Colorado or some parts of, or California and some parts of other areas. But in my area, the spread has to be at least 70K for me to be like, okay, this is a great deal. I need to really pay attention to this. Because like when you have a great spread, like $100,000 in spread right there, trying to estimate the repair costs, it doesn't really matter, unless the property needs everything. Now the property, I'm assuming, always assuming that my $100,000 spread is is in a property that's in livable condition. So somebody can move in there and live in there. Or if you can do minor things to get it in livable condition, that's great. But I'm looking for $100,000 spreads. That way, the estimating the repair costs and all that, it's nothing really because it's in there. So I'll make more videos about this, but that's it for today. Thank you.